Hello, everyone. I'm Susan Hogan, the consumer investigative reporter for NBC4, and I am a proud military spouse, and I am honored to be your MC for today's event. Blue Star Families has been at the forefront of advocating for military families, and their campaign for inclusion is an important step towards addressing the unique challenges that diverse military families face. I believe that it is our community's shared responsibility to shed light on these critical issues, be transparent about what the critical issues are, and seek to find solutions so that our military families feel valued, seen, and respected in the communities where they call home. I look forward to learning from our guest and panelists today and setting the stage so that we all can work together to build a more inclusive and equitable community so none of our military families feel marginalized. And I am joined and so proud to be next to you, a very impressive young woman, Lieutenant General Gwen Bingham. You are U.S. Army retired, chair of the board of directors. And General, to say that you are a trailblazer really is an understatement. In your bio that I was reading, you are a 3-star general of the U.S. Army. And you've been the first woman to hold numerous positions as a general officer. General Bingham, you recently also accepted a position as the Blue Star Families board chair. You are poised to grow the Blue Star Families mission, taking them to new heights. It is so lovely to meet you.
Thank you so much, Susan, and thank you so much for what you do as a military spouse. Right. I want to congratulate you and your husband. I know he's recently retired after 30 years in the Navy.
He has,
so congratulations to you and your hubby, and thank you so much for all of what you do.
Well, thank you.
Appreciate
thank you so much. It's wonderful to be part of this community, for sure. And so right out of the gate, when we're talking about why we're here today, I think a lot of people would love to know why you are so personally involved in this work, General.
Well, thank you so much. I had the great fortune to meet Blue Star Families President, CEO, and founder Kathy Roth Decay actually some years ago in 2016, my last assignment in the military. And we had reason to meet because inside of my portfolio was Army Soldier Family Programs. And of course, Blue Star Families rest very well within that. But let me take you back to shortly after George Floyd's murder in May of 2020. I received a phone call from Kathy. And Kathy said, "Hey, Gwen, it's me. I'm just calling to check on you and see how you are doing." I got to tell you, Susan, I was really overcome and touched by her just reaching out at a time when I really wasn't doing well. All of us watched in living color a person who was murdered on national TV, and just all of the ensuing divisiveness in our country. And I think it really was silently taking a toll on me. And so for her to reach out and call me and check on me was just so heartwarming, and it really invigorated me. After we had that conversation, she says, "Now I do have one ask." She says, "I'm looking to stand up the Racial Equity and Inclusion Committee, and I'd like for you to be one of the co-chairs." Well, after, she was so nice at the front end of the conversation, how could I say no to her? So, of course, I was happy to say yes to a mission I feel like is so vitally important. And we've been going at this now, 3 years almost. Well, knocking on 3 years this month. And it has just been invigorating to see where we started and how we've grown since then.
What are some of the things that you have seen kind of move forward since you've been here for 3 years?
Yeah, so as one of the co-chairs, and you'll have an opportunity to speak with Charles Eggleston, who's also a co-chair, and I've just enjoyed him immensely. So Kathy really put together a great team to serve on this committee. And as one would think, when you're standing up something that's new, you want to pick people who are also passionate about our focus and our mission. And boy, did she deliver on just some amazing leaders in government, in industry, academia. And so as we began to come together and to meet frequently throughout the weeks and months that ensued, we had what we call listening sessions. And I think that is what has made us successful and really stood to give us more of a strategic understanding and awareness of where we wanted to go. Because from those listening sessions, it was amazing how many of us had had similar instances and situations. And it just really was a way of being able to say, we didn't have to suffer in silence because many of us had experienced similar incidents throughout.
Would you mind sharing some of an incident that you remember that that you might want to share with someone and share with all of us that was
Sure.
impactful?
Well, mine started really in college. I had a professor who I had went to seeking help but didn't do so well on a test. And I know this is going back a little ways, but just to set the tone a bit, and I told him what had happened. I didn't score very well on his test, and he looked at me and he said, well, it's a known fact that people like you don't do well in education.
Ugh.
I was taken aback with that. Fast forward to where I'm now a 2-star general at a certain installation, and this one was a better situation, but the gentleman says, hey, General Bing, I really need to tell you something and clear my head a bit. He said, my conscience. And he says, when I first heard that you were coming here, I didn't like it one bit. He said, I didn't like it because you were a woman, and we'd never had a woman here, and I just didn't want to see you in that position. It was a command position of an installation. But since you've been here, you've been the best general commander we've ever had, and I just want to shake your hand. And I thanked him for his candor because he didn't have to share that with me. But it made me realize, and I knew it even beforehand, that everyone's not going to like you, whether that's because you're a woman or because you are a person of color. And I think the George Floyd murder really set us on the path to seeing how prevalent racism and divisiveness has been inside of this country for more than just those few years. We've seen it over many, many decades. And so I think it's a reckoning, if you will, for our nation.
For sure. So what can we do together, to ensure that we are actively moving towards what we're trying to be here and trying to instill building a more inclusive community just based on what you've seen and learned over the years?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think about the word team, teamwork. Together, everyone achieves more. I kind of use that acronym. I think that when we can come together and team and partner together, we can listen to the voice of our military families, we become better for having had that conversation. And really, Kathy and I have talked about this. These are difficult conversations to have. And they're also uncomfortable for folks to rekindle unpleasant situations. But when we can come together, partner, and really have a serious focus on finding solutions to difficult problems, I think it will make us better working as a team.
And what role can the campaign actually for inclusion play in addressing the challenges faced by military families of color?
I think you'll find and you'll hear some of the results of the survey and what's on the minds of our military families and military families of color. And I think as we listen to what our data, and I think that's been one of the good things about Blue Star Families, even since its inception in 2009, is that it's not secondhand or second nature, it's data-driven information. So these are the results of research that really originates from data. And so every year, Blue Star Families has a military family lifestyle survey that we do, and the results of those are really anticipated throughout the Department of Defense. Congressional members, local leaders are all very interested in knowing the results of that survey. So I think as we debut and launch that information to other constituents and entities that are very much a viable part of the solution set and have come together to have meaningful discussions, I think it will be a potentially good end for all of this.
Yeah, so you've been doing this in this role for 3 years. Is there something that you look back on and think, okay, we can make this better, we can do this differently? what can you tell us as far as like just moving things forward?
Yeah, well, I think that's one of the things that Kathy actually does well. She has a very strategic mindset, but she comes from a premise of caring. And I think that's why she and I have always gelled so well. I think you have to have a passion for
Yeah.
people. And it's certainly been my passion for people. And Kathy, you know her well, and she shares that same feeling and sense. And so when people know, you know, I had a boss years ago say this to me. He says, Bingham, you can have all medals and ribbons on your chest, and that's good. He says, but at the end of the day, nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. And I've taken that with me, and so this whole sense of just caring and making people feel that they are valued, they are respected, that their voice matters and makes a difference. That's what I want to see for our future.
What are some of the challenges that these military families face? Just, you know, a lot of people obviously who's watching today know, but, you know, just for you know, folks like me, you know, what are some of the challenges, just so we can understand what's going on there?
I don't want to give away the thunder. You'll hear some of this in the
Yeah,
data,
right.
but I would just tell you its basic rudimentary foundation is you move often.
Yeah.
And you know that lifestyle as a Navy spouse. So you want to be able to say, okay, we're going to Fort, pick a place, or what naval base or Air Force base, and you want that sense of really being able to connect and to feel a sense of welcome and belonging. And honestly, it's as easy as a neighbor coming over with you know, baked goodies, and
Sure.
with when the moving van pulls up and they know you don't have time to cook too much, just offering something, you know, to the family, just to say, hey, we see you, we welcome you here, and we're glad you're here. And I moved after retirement to Austin, Texas, and literally that happened to me. I had neighbors on both sides of me and across the street who walked over and had little goodies for us, and it's just the little things that count. That means so much to say that, hey, we see you and we know you're here and we're very glad that you're here.
You are retired now, and you know, when you look back on your career and what you have done and where you are today, what is the one thing that you are, you know, most proud of? And I know people always ask me, what's my favorite story? I'm like, I've done this for 30 years, so I've got a lot. So that's a tough question, but what is there one thing that really stands out for you?
Oh, by far it's the people.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just the people that I've had the privilege to meet, to team with, to work with along the way. I mean, that's what I have always taken away from every assignment. And the good news is it doesn't stop when you retire,
Right.
Susan.
And you're so busy.
You will, well, no, I'm saying
Yeah.
I've been so blessed to run across friends that I knew from decades ago that I just, you know, run into, and even in the airport or whatever. And it just makes you feel good. It makes you feel like you contributed.
Right.
And I see myself as a lifelong learner, and I love learning new things and being able to contribute and give back.
Yeah, you know, it's so great to see the passion in your eyes,
Thank
and
you.
everyone who's here today, that are on the panel. That's just the respect that you just, you know, have, that they have for you. You can really see that.
Thank you so much.
And we're kind of wrapping up here, and I could talk to you for hours. You know, one of the things is, what was your reflections about the 75th anniversary of the Executive Order of 98, 99, 81? I know that we only have 30 seconds or so, but if you can kind of talk about that.
Well, you know, I know that we've got a lot of events that are going on that's tied to that. Let me just tell you that just this past Thursday, last week, I happened to bear witness to a historic event, and that was the renaming of Fort Lee from Fort Lee to Fort Gregg Adams. And I was just delighted that Lieutenant General retired Arthur Gregg, who is not only a mentor, a friend to so many people, but he's a living legend. And he, along with Lieutenant Colonel Charity Adams and her family, her son and her daughter, were there for that occasion, and it was just awe-inspiring. It really was. And I think in a sense it sort of gets to someone who served in the military many years ago, and I remember him saying he couldn't go into the officers club because he was black. And so if you think about that, yet when you talk to him, he bears no ill will, and he hopes, he said his comments were, I hope that I inspire others. And so I would just end and probably conclude my remarks just to say that we bore witness to that one event that was a historic event where we had a base that had once been named after a Confederate judge, named after two African-American heroes. And it was certainly my privilege to bear witness to that.
Wonderful. Well, on that note, thank you so much. It's been such a joy to really get to know you and to chat with you. And I hope to keep the conversation going as well. So thank you so much
Thank you, Susan.
General, for sharing all of these beautiful personal experiences and your insights with us as well. And your vulnerability and openness have really set the tone for the rest of this event and highlighted the importance of the campaign for inclusion and the work that Blue Star families are doing in this space. Your contributions to the military and to our country are invaluable, and for that we are very grateful for your service, for sure. And we are looking forward to hearing more from from you later on in this segment of the event. Thank you again.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you. It was so nice.
Very nice.
Welcome, everyone, to this important event focused on promoting diversity and inclusion in military and veteran communities through the Campaign for Inclusion initiative. I'm Kathy Roth-Duquet, founder and CEO of Blue Star Families. So why CFI? Since its launch in 2020, this program has provided a platform for sharing experiences and promoting research on the unique challenges faced by military families of color. We've grown, expanding our research initiatives, forming partnerships with organizations that support the military and veteran-connected space, and broadening our aperture to include not just military families of color, but all diverse military families. This work is critical, particularly as we consider the future of the all-volunteer force, which turns 50 this year. This work and research helps to ensure that our military and veteran communities are ready and resilient, and that we can retain and recruit talent by promoting a better environment for all. I want to extend a warm welcome to all the members, partners, and stakeholders who have joined us today to participate in what we hope will be a meaningful conversation. Your presence demonstrates your commitment to strengthening our military and veteran community. I'd like to take a moment to thank all the funders and partners who've made this initiative possible. In particular, I want to thank J.P. Morgan Chase & Company, Lockheed Martin, the USAA Foundation, Wells Fargo, and Booz Allen. Really, this work would not have been possible without their strong support. During this event, we'll hear from experts who will provide a program overview, review the data collected by the CFI program. We'll also highlight the impressive class of Deploy Fellows and review the data with an eye towards community solutions, with the leaders working towards a more inclusive military. You'll hear from a military service roundtable where we will discuss the ways to move forward in creating a better military-connected community. Finally, we'll recap our discussion with a heartfelt conversation and reflection with our own Carlandra C.T. Moss, who's director of Blue Star Families Campaign for Inclusion. She's a retired Army First Sergeant and a military mom. She'll be joined by Lieutenant General Gwen Bingham, U.S. Army retired, and the newly appointed chair of the Board of Blue Star Families. Once again, welcome to everyone, and thank you for joining us today in promoting diversity and inclusion in the military and veteran communities.
There may be some that wonder why you need a campaign for inclusion. And one of the striking examples of why this is important is the results of the survey.
I'm a big believer in data. Data points the way. It helps you understand what you really have. It's very persuasive to people when they see it. And the fact people are turning down assignments because they don't want to live in a location is a really important thing.
Blue Star Families understands our responsibility and is taking steps to ensure that we are delivering our vision that all military families feel a sense of belonging and continue to build stronger community connections.
For the last, 10, 12 years, they have been the definitive voice.
And Blue Star Families is leading the way in identifying meaningful work at the cross-section of equity and our military and veteran families.
At the very onset, we knew that we would need passionate and powerful voices helping to lead the way.
Through the 5 pillars of focus, we bring together public, private, and nonprofit thought leaders to keep our finger on the pulse.
Campaign for Inclusion is building an opportunity for communities of color, queer communities, disabled communities, all of our communities to come together as one and welcome each other and create that sense of belonging that we all need within the military community.
This fellowship presented itself. It was a light bulb for me. It was in line with what I want to see for my own family, and it was an opportunity for me to implement and be a part of a change that I really wanted to see for a long time within my military community.
That's what this is about. This is about making us stronger as a country, stronger as a military, understanding each other better, communicating with each other better.
So we're going to take this, we're going to work with it, we're going to keep going. We're going to understand from this and we're going to act to try to make our lives better.
It really energizes me and many others to do what we can to make it better for the next generation.
Thank you for taking this journey with us as we renew our commitment to this important work. Hello, everyone. I am C.T. Moss, Director of Blue Star Family's Campaign for Inclusion. I am a 24-year Army veteran, but most importantly, I'm a military mom. As the mother of an active duty soldier and airman, I want to ensure that their military experience is better than mine. That's why this work is so important to me personally, and I'm thankful to all of you for your care in this initiative. Our first panel about the top findings of this year's Campaign for Inclusion Research Series. The panel of experts will discuss key issues and challenges and talk about policy and program solutions. Dr. Jessica Strong has lived experience as a military spouse and the Senior Director of Research and Policy at Blue Star Families. Dr. Strong, I will pass things over to you.
Thank you, CT. It's my pleasure to introduce you to the distinguished panelists for today's first panel, our data-driven panel. Our experts come from diverse backgrounds and have an exceptional wealth of knowledge and experience in their respective fields. First, we have Colonel Dr. Janice Carroll, Deputy Director of the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, Office of the Secretary of the Air Force. Her extensive background in human resources and talent management, coupled with her expertise in diversity and inclusion, makes her a valuable asset to our panel. We're also joined by Chief Master Sergeant Jeff Grilla, Senior Enlisted Leader at the United States Space Force. With over 30 years of experience in the U.S. Army and now in the United States Space Force, he has a wealth of knowledge on the importance of data in decision-making and how it can be used to drive change and improve processes. Please join me in welcoming our esteemed panelists for today's panel.
Thank you.
Welcome, guys. I'm so glad you guys are here with us today. Last year, we published the Diverse Experiences of Military and Veteran Families of Color. It was a groundbreaking report that highlighted both good news and challenges that are unique to military and veteran families of color. One of the key findings last year was that many families of color take concerns about racism, discrimination, and family safety into consideration when making decisions about their military career, whether it's looking at duty station preferences or deciding whether or not to remain in military service. What we found this year was that experiences of discrimination, whether they occur in the military community or the civilian community, also impact other important decisions, such as whether they would recommend their community or military service overall. Furthermore, these experiences also impact military families' sense of belonging to the community, which can be detrimental to individual resilience and well-being. We saw that those who experienced incidents of discrimination reported significantly less belonging, significantly less likelihood to recommend their community to families like theirs, and significantly less likelihood to recommend military service. So I wanted to start by asking you both, Chief Master Sergeant Grilla, why don't we start with you? What is your overall reaction to these findings?
Thank you. I think it's essential that we use data-driven information like this to listen to the experiences of our service members and their families so that we can improve their quality of life and ensure that we're providing the resources and services available to them in the same.
Colonel Carroll?
Yes, as a matter of fact, as Chief mentioned, it is essential to look at the data. As surveys are given often, we gather the information, but what do we do with the data? And the fact that families are basically speaking out. They're speaking out saying there's a lack or a sense of not belonging in these communities. And so the fact that the survey pointed out those are decision points in what our families do if they decide to serve, or more importantly, allowing other people of their family members to serve in the current state of the propensity to serve with recruiting.
Right, exactly. We're in the middle of a recruitment challenge,
Yes.
and so it becomes even more important that the families that currently are serving have that quality of life that they'll want to recommend service to their young family members to continue the all-volunteer force.
Yes,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
All right, so do these findings resonate with some of your experiences during your career?
They do. Early in my career, at one of my duty stations, I did experience a community or an environment where I didn't feel quite welcome as a military member, although over the majority of my career, the inverse has been really true. Not only accepting myself and a very diverse team that I worked with, welcoming us into the community, but also really treating us like one of their own. And I think we've made great strides in the last couple of decades in this regard, and I really appreciate this undertaking and this effort and the team for being a part of that.
Yeah, we're glad you're here too, and thank you for contributing that. Colonel Carroll.
So the findings, so my career, again, much like the chief, I have experienced both good and bad. There's been times in my career that I would step back to say, I can't believe this is happening, either to myself or to an airman or now a guardian. There are things that really don't have a place in our military or in our country because they do affect the overall mental state of our airmen and guardians by just being treated differently. It is all about human dignity. So the findings are real, and we need to take heed to what those findings actually say about how airmen and their families feel.
Exactly.
Agreed. Okay, so the next question is for you, Chief Master Sergeant Grillo. You spent 26 years in the Army before you transitioned over to the Space Force.
I did.
What contributed to your decision to change branches?
Actually, it starts as a child, in reality, back in grade school. I grew up in inner city Cleveland. I understood the challenges of diverse environments. I also understood the importance of inclusion because I felt it as a young child. In educating myself on this topic, I stumbled across many books written and wrote about Dr. Martin Luther King. And I absolutely fell in love with his approach. And he often spoke about the propensity to serve each other, which led me to want to join the military. And he's been a lifelong hero of mine ever since. So knowing that the military is a melting pot, is a diverse organization, I joined the Army. And over the years, I've been a part of many high-performing teams, extremely diverse and highly successful. And it was apparent to me that the reason why they were so successful is the diversity and the diverse thought, and ensuring that there was no obstacles impeding that success. And so when I saw Space Force standing up, I was like, hey, this is an opportunity to be on the ground floor of doing just that. So I jumped on that opportunity. Another key point I think that factors into this discussion is when I read the Guardian Ideal, which is the founding document of our value system, the Guardian Commitment, which is our promise to each other to live those values. And now recently we published the Guardian Spirit, which amplifies all of that thought. That ties into creating a culture and an environment that is diverse and just flourishes because we're all inclusive in our approach.
Yeah, and including all those diverse perspectives really makes for a stronger team, as you mentioned.
It does.
I appreciate that. All right. Another key finding from this research is the importance of military cultural competence in the community. When respondents felt that community members understood and respected military life, they also reported a greater sense of belonging to the community and greater likelihood to recommend that community to other families like theirs. So this attribute was also the top contributing factor to creating a sense of belonging for respondents. So, Colonel Dr. Carroll. Colonel Carroll, you were the commander at Hill Air Force Base, where this issue in particular was highlighted by reports of racism in the local school district. What insights can you share from that experience on how communities and the military can work together?
Wow, that is thank you for the question. And yes, I happened to be at Hill Air Force Base as the installation commander when a report was published by the Department of Justice that indicated findings of racism and discrimination in the school, Davis County School to be specific, and that's the school that really supports the installation at large. And receiving the report, when it was published, I actually had to take a deep breath because the findings listed in that report were egregious, to say the least, especially in today's environment. And once I received the report, cultivated really a team, and having the community involvement was so key. And that community involvement did not happen overnight. And so because I took command in 2020, the report was published late in 2020, we already had the barriers broken down. So there was communication from the governor on down. So understanding the community partners and leaders, it helped us really navigate that time. But the time is still there because there's still actually individuals that are facing those things that were faced when I was there just a year ago. And the findings, something to the effect of having a young kid with a different type of background, or one that actually has a physical disability because of EFMP, or one that is Black, and having them bullied and called names, it floored me. And that right there says we need to pause and relook at where we send airmen and their families. And because we in this uniform, Chief and I, and like over 690,000 others, we raise our hand. We're serving our country, and we don't really sometimes get a choice in where we go. So as a commander, it was my duty to take care of those airmen, which are my family. They're my family because that's what we are. We're a team.
Yeah.
It's true.
I love that.
It's true.
I love that.
It's so true.
Yes. And you got to take care of each other because that's the family that you have there on the ground. You don't. We don't always get a choice about, or as much choice in where we're going next. So it becomes important to build family when you get there, and that family starts with the people that you work with.
And Jess, the other thing I have to point out is I did not have any children in school. So if I had not received the report and gained knowledge of this, I could have really served my career, my time there at Hill, and never even known that there was a problem in the schools. So I have to commend the DOJ for actually doing the study and publishing the study, making it known. So now we know from a Department of Defense perspective, partnering with Blue Star families to really get after those issues.
Yeah, and that was one thing that came up in the findings as well, is we saw that the respondents reported most active duty family respondents of color did not experience discrimination in their communities, but 4 in 10 of our active duty family respondents of color reported that they had a child who experienced racially or ethnically motivated bullying in their current community. And so that's kind of the experiences that you're talking about at Hill Air Force Base. And while these incidents occur in the civilian community outside of the gates, away from the military installation, it still impacts the military family to a great degree. So, and one of the other things was we saw that even those who had experienced those things, when we asked in the survey, most did not report it to their military or civilian leaders, because for a variety of reasons. But if we don't hear about those things, those investigations, those the collaboration with the community can't happen.
No.
So I'm glad that you had that rapport built up.
Yes. And just the one fact you said, many that it occur with don't report it. There's a fear factor of reporting. There's a fear factor of someone not believing that they were actually discriminated against, or there's a fear that if I speak up, something may happen. So the harm factor actually triggers into that decision making.
Yeah, yes, that the fear factor, and if it happens outside of the gates, it's not really there's the thought that it's not really the military's responsibility. It's not, what is my commander going to do about it, because this happened at the school and they're not control, they don't control the school. So I think, and I'm going to pose this question to you, it's not pre-organized, but what can leaders do to encourage families to come forward when they've had these experiences, to assuage that feeling of fear?
And so, Chief, you want to go first?
I mean, first and foremost, creating psychological safety in the
Yes.
workplace is key. You know, and being connected, which is one of our values, being connected is also key. Having the character, commitment, and courage to have those difficult conversations, both up and down, that's probably the most important aspect that I would point out initially.
And much like Chief just said, you know, connectiveness, and it really is about breaking down barriers early. What I notice is if you're having a conversation like we are today early, people may come to you if something happens. But if that's the first time they have to come to you and to give bad news, they will not come to you. So it's really about communicating. It's all about communicating.
Yeah,
Breaking down barriers early and making sure people understand, come to me if there's a problem. And when they come to you, listen. Listening is so key because we say,
Absolutely.
come to me, and then we discount what they have to say and don't listen.
Yeah, getting ahead of it, having
Yes.
leading with those uncomfortable topics and
Yes,
conversations, so that
yes.
it's not, they don't have to be the one to start
Right,
the uncomfortable conversation.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that experience. Chief Master Sergeant Grilla, as a news service, how is the Space Force approaching diversity and inclusion from recruitment and education perspective?
Absolutely. As a new service, our overarching objective is to create ready and resilient combat credible forces in a space domain that's really dynamic and brings challenges that we've never seen before. We know that we can't do that without attracting highly specialized, highly skilled, and highly diverse talent. So in that regard, of note, the University Partnership Program is one of the initiatives we're approaching. We have partnerships with universities such as Howard University, North Carolina A&T, as well as the University of Puerto Rico. We've also been very involved in the Department of the Air Force Barrier Analysis Working Group, which has created relationships and partnerships with organizations like the American Indian Science and Engineering Society, Women in Space, as well as just recently we participated in the African American Engineer of the Year program. So yeah, on that front, I'm really excited. Recruiting is one aspect, as you pointed out. The other is education. I think the best example that I could pose would be the way we conduct promotion boards, special education opportunity boards, as well as assignments boards. We work lockstep with your office, ma'am.
Yes.
And before the board even starts reviewing packets, they get unconscious bias training, as well as reviewing the D&I statistics for the group that we're boarding against the overall population of Space Force. And I think the results have proven that this approach and the lens that we look at, which is, agnostic of names, or not names necessarily, but race, gender, any of those diverse categories, we have been at or above the statistical reflection in terms of this discussion. And then at the end of the board, we go back with your team, ma'am, and ensure that there isn't anything that we missed in terms of the selections that the board made, as well as taking a look at and inquiring why did certain folks not apply for opportunities, and what can we do to make sure that everybody is aware and comfortable, regardless of what the discussion and what the boarding procedure is.
I love that approach about not only building it into the process ahead of time to say, these are the things that you want to look out for and be aware of as you're making these decisions, but also on the end, looking at, now how did it all turn out? And then adding that extra step of who didn't apply, because that is an important piece that is often
Absolutely,
missed.
and the reasons why they did not apply.
Yeah, that's an important piece that's often missed, because the people who may not apply because they don't think that it's for them. How can we make it?
Absolutely. We've had many conversations over this.
So Jess, if I can add on to what Chief just explained, you come in, you understand the process as it was, but how is it that we make the process better? As Chief indicated, who didn't apply? Why didn't they apply? Was it that the information did not get to their level? And so really we have an incoming process, we have a process, and then we kind of have a checks and balance almost in
Absolutely,
the end.
yeah.
And it's not to change anything, but it really is to gain an understanding to make it better as we go forward. We have the data from many, many surveys, but how do we make it better for the next generation? So we're very happy that we're able to partner and really serve our newest force, our Space Force. So thank you, Chief.
Thank you, ma'am.
And I love the approach with data, with bringing in the data, and not only looking at survey data and data from external sources, external to the military like Blue Star Families, but also looking at the data that you bring with you, like who is applying, who is not applying, who is moving on and who is not, and analyzing that data to come up with where are we and what is the way forward.
I think it tells the follow-on to that, it tells a story. And when the information is published, Space Force can go back and say, well, the reason you didn't have X amount of this group or that group is because they didn't apply. It's not as if they were discounted in their records. It merely is because they did not have those records to score and they did not meet the board. So all of those things truly factor in to the end state.
And that leads me to one final question for us. I understand you just completed your dissertation, and congratulations on the glass ceiling phenomenon.
Thank you. Yes.
And while it was focused on gender rather than race or ethnicity, can you tell us more about it and the implications that it has for inclusion in the armed forces, particularly on issues of intersectionality, as we're looking at some of the things we were just discussing, promotion boards and special opportunity boards?
Wow. So yes, thank you. So yes, I just completed my PhD, and I focused on the glass ceiling phenomenon. And I looked initially, my dissertation is on officer ranks. But during the research and the findings, there are so many studies that date back 70 plus years, and they really bring up a few things that are there. One is process is indicative of the process. If you haven't relooked your process from when you started something and it's still the same, that potentially is a big barrier because things have changed. The things that were noted is we've been doing things a certain way or same way, and in the Air Force, we have a tendency, because I'm speaking on the Air Force, we have a tendency to think only a certain group can lead when really the collection of all backgrounds and experiences truly make better teams, team of teams, if you will. So that research showed me that we have a lot of work to do, and we need to step back before we can go forward, look at the data, assess the data, and look at the output. Is it that we're not putting individuals up for opportunities because of the lens that their leaders are looking through? So the research was it was a great experience for me, and I'm glad to be completed.
Yeah,
I bet you're glad to be completed. Yeah. I agree.
Glad to be completed.
Thank you so much for sharing that with your research, and thank you for sharing your experiences with us today. I appreciate your time with us. Now we are going to turn to a video about our Deploy Fellows.
This cohort is building something unique, something that has not been in this space before.
There still seems to be missing the sense of families being bilingual, that not all families' first language is English.
They feel it's important to bridge the community.
I think it's extraordinarily important for other organizations, for community to see that there are fellowship programs like this that intend to lift up diverse voices, that shows that the organization is not just talking the talk, they are living in that and they are walking that.
We understand the need to diversify our military and veteran service organizations. It's essential that this program provides a platform so the fellows are introduced and are given an opportunity to network with those in the MSO-VSO space.
Campaign for Inclusion Fellowship within Blue Star Families has provided an opportunity for spouses like me to not only get paid to learn, but to also be able to infuse the skills that we have into building a network of capable, confident military spouse employees throughout the MSO and VSO space.
By working and learning together, we can develop relationships that will extend beyond this short time together.
Reaching those more diverse families and the ones that are maybe forgotten is one of the biggest goals that each of us fellows have had during this fellowship.
Families still need support. Families still need those resources.
I hope to continue to grow more awareness and support for LGBT plus families.
The most urgent and pressing question is, What are you doing for others?
When you look back at the last 100 years of the armed forces and witness the evolution of who was accepted and when, it paints the picture of a force and a society that have made great progress, but there is still much more work to achieve together.
But this committee allows us to showcase that we are the same fabric of diversity of the community, and that I, for example, represent that minority that have a lot of diversity who can make a difference themselves as well as I did. And that is the gift of inspiring each other.
The Campaign for Inclusion Committee includes men and women from all backgrounds. This powerful committee is composed of senior military leaders from all branches, community advocates, wounded warriors, caregivers, and military spouses.
Having been a part of this organization from the beginning, I know firsthand the passion and dedication behind everything Blue Star Family does.
There's a phrase that says it takes a village. All of those who support require a community, a village, all coming together to make a difference. And that's what the Campaign for Inclusion is all about.
You know, I understand what can be achieved by building bridges of understanding and education. And I believe this committee's goal is to build unified, stronger force by caring about the concerns of all our military families.
The job is never going to be over. We're always going to continue to work. Success is a team of civilians, organizations, public and private, working with the military to make this armed forces team the best that it can be.
That it will take all of us working together to ensure the future and the strength of the nation's military. You want to support military and veteran families, and Blue Star Families will help you deliver that support. Join the Campaign for Inclusion.
Hello, everyone. I'm Charles Eggleston, retired Army Staff Sergeant, Purple Heart recipient, and a proud co-chair of the Campaign for Inclusion Committee. When I was at Walter Reed, I had 50 plus surgeries during my stay. That's when I got involved with Blue Star Families. Since that time, years ago, Blue Star Families has remained one of the most impactful organizations for me. Our final panel is the Military Service Roundtable. This features leaders from 3 services: Air Force, the Army, and the Marine Corps. We want to hear from all and learn from each other. We can do better when we listen to each other. Joining us is Dr. Jessica Strong.
Thank you again for the warm introduction, Staff Sergeant Eggleston. And welcome back to the second and final panel of today's event. This is the Military Service Roundtable, and we have another impactful session in front of us. As I mentioned in the previous panel, some of the, actually first, we have Yvette Busico. Thank you for joining us today. She is the Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Army for Manpower and Reserve Affairs. With years of experience in the Department of Defense, she brings valuable insight on the challenges and the opportunities facing the U.S. Army and our military as a whole. Next, thank you, glad you're here today. Next, we have Dr. Norvell Dillard, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Senior Advisor to the United States Marine Corps, performing the duties of the Chief Diversity Officer. With his experience in DEI and leadership roles in the Marines, he brings an invaluable perspective on how the military can work to create a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive environment.
Thank you.
And last but not least, we have the Honorable Alex Wagner, Assistant Secretary of the Air Force for Manpower and Reserve Affairs. With years of experience in the Air Force and private sector, he brings unique insight into the challenges and opportunities facing the U.S. Air Force and how the military can leverage technology and innovation to stay ahead of the curve.
Excited to be here today. Yeah.
Thank you for joining us.
Really
I'm
looking
so
forward to
glad
the
you guys are.
conversation.
Oh, yeah, I know. I'm looking forward to it too. We had a wonderful prep session where we were able to talk a little bit, and I'm looking forward to engaging in that conversation a little bit more. So please join me in welcoming our esteemed panelists to the table for what promises to be another fascinating discussion. So, as I mentioned on the previous panel, some of the key findings this year from this year's research is the impact of experiences of racial and ethnic discrimination on military families' sense of belonging. their likelihood to recommend the community, and their likelihood to recommend service. We talked a little bit about that on the last panel. What I'd like to start off with today is asking each of you, why does diversity and inclusion matter to the services? So I'm going to start with you, Dr. Dillard. Why does diversity and inclusion matter?
Well, first I want to thank you certainly for the introduction and for inviting me, but also what Blue Star families are doing for our families. I just want to say thank you because families are us. I want to say that DEI is a strategic imperative for the Marine Corps. Operational readiness is where it fits in. And operational readiness also ties to the readiness of our Marine. Attached to that Marine is the family. So we have to make sure that unit is ready. So operational readiness is one of the key things. But in addition to that, what's key for diversity, equity, and inclusion, why it matters, is one, recruiting and retention, certainly innovation and ideas, teamwork and talent, and performance and productivity. Those are the things that we can get from diversity, equity, and inclusion in the Marine Corps. Now, to note, our strategic plan, our 5-year strategic plan, have lines of efforts that relate to each one of those lines. So we have a 5-year plan to make sure that it's inculcated throughout the Marine Corps, and we drive on with it.
All right, thank you for that answer. I know it's so clear that diversity, equity, inclusion is important to the Marine Corps and continuing to build on that. All right, Mr. Wagner, from the Air Force's perspective, Air Force and Space Force.
Yeah, right. So the Department of the Air Force comprises both the Air Force and the Space Force, which gives me some really interesting and different perspectives to talk about today, and I'm excited to share some of them with you. What I'd say on why diversity and inclusion matters, well, first of all, it's the right thing to do. Second, when you're looking to assess a high-performing team, you want to be able to reach talent everywhere, including talent that's non-traditional or hasn't been reached before. And so being expansive and looking at talent broadly and investing in areas and growing talent and propensity where you haven't before makes sense. But for the Department of the Air Force, and really for the Department of Defense writ large, diversity and inclusion matters because of the science that underlies it. And the science of diversity is that high-performing teams outperform teams of homogeneous individuals when those high-performing teams are intentionally diverse. The Air Force and Space Force operate from a team of teams perspectives. And so while we work on some of the most exquisite technological platforms, we can't succeed unless we bring all of the experiences, all of the talents, all of the perspectives to the mission. And there's no mission as high stakes as the mission that the Department of Defense does every single day. And I'm not willing to put any of our strategic advantages to the side, given our near-peer competitors.
That is a great answer. Going back to the science and the data behind it, this is not just the right thing to do, it's empirically based, and that is why it's so important. Wonderful. Ms. Bustico.
It's going to be challenging.
I know.
But I will capitalize on their answers.
Yeah.
I'd like to associate myself with the remarks of Dr. Dillard and Honorable Mr. Wagner. But in addition, I love how you started with families, because we understand as the Army, and I know our sister services do as well, that we recruit the soldier and the service member, but we retain the family. That sense of belonging really, really matters. If I am afraid that my son is going to be discriminated against because of the color of his skin or, whatever, I'm unlikely to want to stick around and stay in a service that's going to direct where I'm going to live. If I don't feel like I have resources to access in case my family's in trouble, I know that that is going to impact my decision to stay in the service. We're seized of that. And diversity, equity, inclusion is the way that we are able to support those families with those challenges. We have a variety of programs that, as Mr. Wagner pointed out, are based on the science. It's inherent in our work to build those cohesive teams in order to deliver that lethality that we're so proud of and that we're charged with so seriously, our nation's defense. How are we going to make sure that people are able to show up and do their jobs well if they're worried about things that are happening at home or their communities? And we provide structure, we provide resources for people to access, to have those cohesive teams at work, and have the opportunity for those families to access when something negative happens to them.
Yeah.
This isn't a side thing or a nice to have. This is critical and a necessary component to readiness. If that airman or guardian is worried about their kids, worry about their spouse, not being able to shop in the local community, not being able to get access to a bank. They're not focused on the mission. I need Airman and Guardian every single day focused 100% on the mission. And readiness and diversity and inclusion are not two separate things. They're one and the same.
100%, but also, those cohesive teams, we're really proud of our diversity. And it's not just racial or orientation or gender or, it's geographical, it's diversity viewpoint. We know that we are fortunate in that we're drawing from the society, the greatest country that has ever existed in the history of the world, right? We have all these amazing Americans that we draw into the service, and they come from all different parts of the world. That was one of the most salient things to me. My first friend in the Air Force was from Fayetteville, North Carolina, and I didn't know anything about that part of the country, to be honest, and she taught me about it.
Yes.
And it was a great experience. It had nothing to do with, color of skin or anything like that. It was just, who was I serving alongside? How could we, to the point that Dr. Diller was making, how can I leverage those different viewpoints in order to achieve the mission? It's directly related. It's making that strength, that diversity, converting it into lethality.
And as Dr. Diller noted, that's our strategic advantage versus our near-peer competitors. I don't think Russia and I don't think China values this. I don't think Russia or China thinks about it. And so our ability to leverage that will help us not only build these exquisite platforms and maximize the use of these technologies, but it's our people that are really our strategic advantage and our strategic discriminator.
Yeah, one thing I'll add to that is, as we talk about teams, we talk about our service members, we want everybody to understand that the family is part of the team. We got their backs, and they're never alone.
Yeah, those are great points. Like, we do have the diversity of people that we have to draw from within the United States, within the military, is incredible. You mentioned your friend from Fayetteville, North Carolina. There's also foreign-born spouses, foreign-born service members. There's people from all over not only the country but the world, that bring so many different cultures and perspectives together.
My parents are an example of this. My dad was born in Jamaica, and my parents came. My mom brought him from Jamaica, and they had worked a series of odd jobs. They walked by a recruiting station, and my mom said, "We should join the Air Force." And he said, "I'm not doing that." And she said, "You can get your education." And he said, "Okay, I'm listening," because he's Jamaican. And that's true. Jamaicans work super hard, and they're interested in education. I lived that. I can say that with authority. And that's what drew them in. Both of them earned their degrees. I'm the American story.
Here you are.
There's millions like me. I'm not particularly unique at all. But you're right. We are bringing people from different backgrounds, different countries. We have, for example, we just came from a meeting that talked about how important it is for us to have language talent in the service in order to ensure that we can translate intelligence, right? That is foundational for us to be able to be effective on the battlefield and project power globally. Well, where are we going to get those people from? Certainly, we can take smart Americans off the street and put them into language colleges and teach them up. But guess what? There's people who speak those languages around the table, and that's their first language. And we want to be attractive to them and help them contribute to their society in their unique way. That's absolutely what we should be bringing that talent into the service for.
Something you said that really struck me was about education. And very often what I hear from immigrant communities and minority communities is that the military is an alternative to education. Well, the Department of the Air Force runs the largest community college in the world. For us, having skilled, trained, and educated airmen and guardians is part of who we are. It's part of our culture. So it's not really an alternative. It's actually a pathway to education. And I think we don't tell that story enough.
And just to capitalize on that, we know that young folks, when they talk about barriers to entering service, a major attitude is, well, I think that that's going to interrupt my pathway in life. They don't really necessarily see the service as a way to get to where they want to go. But my parents, myself, right? I'm the product of ROTC and junior ROTC. I earned my education in uniform. Like, that is the way that I got to get my law degree and be a JAG and now sit here representing Army people. It's not something that's separate and apart. It's something that we're hoping young people understand is the pathway for them to reach those goals.
It's not an either or, it's a pathway too.
Exactly.
And I want to share that a lot of this is not really new. When we look at how we come in and how our differences can be our advantage, I go back to World War II with the Navajo code talkers.
Yeah.
They used their native language. Actually, they turned the war in World War II. Their dialect that they used, nobody else understood. We can move forward to certainly to the Lioness program that we have for the Marine Corps, where men could not go in where the Afghan women were, but the women could. They made a tremendous difference. And even today, we have cultural advisors that speak particular languages that connect to the community. So whoever you are, wherever you are, come bring your best self. And that's where your diversity, we can use that across the
I love those. Those are perfect, clear examples of why our diversity is our strategic advantage. Excellent point. Let me add on to this. I know we're kind of talking about attracting people and bringing them in. So let me ask, one of the things that we found in this year's research was that experiences of racism and discrimination were associated with less likelihood to recommend military service, even if they occurred in the civilian community. So what are the implications of this for recruitment, future recruitment and retention, especially in the context of the recruitment challenges that we have been experiencing over the past few years?
So I'll start. Our people are not only our strategic advantage and critical to our success on the battlefield of today and that of the future, but frankly, they're also our brand ambassadors. And they're ambassadors to their communities, they're ambassadors to their families, they're ambassadors to their friends groups, and they're ambassadors to influencers. If they're having negative experiences in local communities or on post, not only are we going to know that that's creating challenges, we need to know that that's creating challenges, but then we have the resources and the connections in the community to try to solve some of those challenges. So for so many people in the military who feel like this isn't a big deal or I've had to deal with this all of my life, I'd encourage you to speak up. We need to know what's going on so we can help make your life better because you are our best recruiting tool.
I couldn't agree more. We just started off with the soldier referral program. We recognize that we have a disconnect between the American people and the military service. Most of our recruits are drawn from military families, and that's a diminishing number, right? And a lot of people are serving, and to your point, they're recommending against service in some cases for a variety of reasons. We want people to tell positive stories about their service that are authentic, and draw people in with those stories. And Mr. Wagner's right. Like, if we don't have the support network that will ensure that they have those positive stories, then it is going to be more challenging for us to continue to recruit.
Yeah, and it's been a challenge. We've enjoyed the all-volunteer force for over 50 plus years. But every year there are challenges. It ebbs and flows. But at the end of the day, the profession of arms is a noble place to serve. And for our centers of influence, being our parents, family, teachers, some in academia, some others, we want them to know that if they want to serve, this is a place that they can certainly come and have equal opportunity, and we'll use them to the best of their abilities, and certainly want to be in an inclusive environment where they belong. And at the end of the day, we can make sure that we use those talents to make sure we can continue to protect the nation as we've done in the past. So, I think for us, it's an honor to serve, and for those who have, I think they understand. But for those where it's waning, I know we've talked about the possibility of a national narrative to go back to talking a little bit about the value of service, how important it is. I came from a family of 9. okay, and my brother and I. And, you know, this was an opportunity for me. I never looked back. You know, my brother didn't, as well as so many others that have stories that they can tell from that. But I'm grateful for the opportunity to serve, and I encourage others to come in and do this as well.
But you know, you mentioned the 50 years of the all-volunteer force, and that's a double-edged sword. As Yvette noted, in 1980, 40% of Americans had a parent who served. Today, that number is about 13%. And so at the core of our recruiting challenges, I think, across the Department of Defense, is this lack of familiarity. What we have to do is rely on our people to get the word out about the opportunities, the challenges, both positive and negative, but really the sense of team that military service creates. And if they tell those stories authentically, then I think that will help fill some of the gap of this lack of familiarity. That's what the Department of Air Force is laser focused on, bridging that lack of familiarity. And this is not something we can do ourselves. We've got to do it as a department, as a whole of government, and then also engaging partners and advocacy associations like Blue Star Families.
And I'd like to tie in, you know, the work that the Blue Star Families has done, particularly in DEI, and why this is relevant to recruiting. There's a ZipRecruiter survey that says that 90% of young people, millennials and Gen Xers, I don't know which one it is, but
Gen Z, we're Gen Xers.
Okay, yikes. Of the young folk, tells you which, I'm not being recruited. Their attitudes are around, 90% of them are looking for strong DEI programs when they are looking for an employer. And while it's true, service is it's a calling. It's talked about in these kind of high-flown terms. It's also an employment decision, and we are competing against the private sector for young people to say, this is where I'd like to spend the best years of my formative years, right? And if we don't have an attractive DEI program, this is what the data is showing us. If we don't take into consideration leveraging people's differences, bringing those differences together, and turning that into results. If we don't value that, if we, you know, give it short shrift, or we aren't able to clearly articulate our values around that, we are not going to be attractive to the up-and-coming generation, whatever they want to call themselves. We need to be responsive to what the labor market is telling us right now, what society is telling us right now, what the attitudes of young Americans is telling us, and deliver on that, or we're not going to be able to staff the force that we really need, and that we all understand, and lots of people who have served in uniform understand, really is a wonderful way to serve and give your talents to your country.
You know, much of what I saw in the Blue Star Families report was a sense of a lack of belonging.
Yes.
In the community, on the installations, and I want to revert and talk about that in relation to recruiting and coming in. I know for the Marine Corps, and many of the Marines will understand this, you know, from the time you step on the yellow footprints, okay, at Parris Island until you leave and beyond, once you earn the Eagle Globe and Anchor, you are a Marine. So that's the belonging. And I can say the same for the Army, having spent 26 years there.
Thank you for
that.
Thanks for that.
Once you join, and I know it's the same for the Air Force and the others, you become a part of a team.
Yeah.
But it's hard to tell you that from the outside. You have to come in, you have to join, you have to be part of that, and you'll see how your career, how your life, and how your family's life can be catapulted based on what you find with that team. You'll learn leadership skills and things you never knew you had that will last a lifetime. So I say that because I live it, and I know that this is part of the belonging not only that we have, but we want to make sure the family stays attached to get that not only from us, but we'll work to get that better from the community and installations as well.
I'd love to just, you know, to build on what you were saying. I just remember the first time that I put on the Air Force uniform when I was very skinny. I was a very skinny, like 15, 16-year-old, and I was in the same uniform as my parents, right? And I kept that uniform on for 4 years of junior ROTC, 4 years of senior ROTC, and 10 years before they had to pry me out because I had a disability, and I wanted to continue serving, and that's why I'm back here serving as a civilian, right? That's a continuum of a career, and I felt like I belonged. I come from a certain background I've kind of talked about, and I'm serving next to people who, our XO in our office is from Colorado. We have people from all over the place that we get to interact with and learn about and talk about. I mean, one of my great colleagues, he's from Minnesota. We don't agree on anything, but we talk about soup, right? Like our different interests in food. And we belong together even though that we're different, and we're able to make the department go because of that.
Well, this has been a wonderful discussion. We only have a couple of minutes left, so I have one quick question. If you could say succinctly.
Oh, we got a lightning round.
All right,
lightning. Yes, this is the lightning round.
All right, we're challenged.
So we've talked a lot about the recruitment challenges and bringing people in. How do we keep people in? How do these issues impact military readiness and maybe retention overall?
Go ahead.
So
I can go quick.
we've been working on this a lot from the leadership levels. I heard on the last panel you talking about how the leaders connect, and there are certainly some avenues for that we have in the Army, but also on the squad level, right? That's the smallest unit. It's about 4 people. How can we have those organic connections, provide that support? Because we have this mix of formal programs, and I can go down the list of those things, but at the end of the day, those personal connections are what people remember about their service. Their friends, the guys that they grab coffee with or low-crawled, or
The people you talk about soup with.
exactly, right? So that's what you remember. It's scary going to talk to a commander. I'm not going to say, that's actually the most practical direction I would give a young person who said, I experienced racism or sexism or something like that. It's scary. You might talk to your squad mate. And so we have, we've formalized, this is my squad, where people are just given tools on how to have those informal conversations and connect and say, hey, do you know about this resource? Maybe you can talk to a chaplain, or maybe you can talk to a family life counselor. Before you build up to the big scary, well, I have to report this to leadership or something. Give them something that is that's more familiar and easier to access in order to get that support, so they're not suffering in silence, right? We're generating structure around those conversations to make sure they happen, because we don't want people just leaving and not saying why when we could have helped them out. Sorry, that wasn't succinct. But.
It's okay. It was very
Well, I'll
thorough.
try my hand at it. So the Department of the Air Force is a high-tech department. And being high-tech means you have to rely on data. So in 2020 and 2021, we did a series of reviews to find out how communities of color within the department were faring. And we found out that there were real disparities. Disparities in military justice, disparities in accession, disparities in career development, disparities in promotion. And so we took all that data and we said, we know that there are challenges. These are real. These are not only perception, which matters, but the data bears that out. And now we have a number of initiatives and lines of effort designed to make real-time improvements, and we've already implemented a number of policy changes. What that gets us to is intentional inclusion. It's not something that is only based on the individual, but leadership from the top of the echelon, the secretary, the 2 service chiefs on down to that squadron commander has to take this seriously. Focus on inclusion. That builds a better team. That gets you to ready teams. That gets you to lethal teams.
Great. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about Talent Management 2030.
Yes.
I know last year we talked about it. You asked about updates.
Yes.
We just came out with an update last month. Great timing. I got to tell you, that's an ambitious talent management program that now, along with what's happened with Blue Star families, we're giving the Marines the opportunity to make decisions to request some things where they can consider the family included in that. Some of them are Commander's Retention Program, where folks can, in terms of retention, within 24 hours, 48 hours, they can re-enlist. We also have a Staff Non-Commissioned Officer Promotion Board realignment, where you can put off a board for a year with no recourse, because it's best for your family, your assignment, other things you're doing. Also, we got Recruiting Station Commander Officer Selection Board. That's something that we're working where they can come in and make decisions for themselves. One of the things I think will be interesting on the LOE 2 of that is that we will work to minimize non-essential permanent change of stations.
Oh. Nice.
That's critical.
Yeah.
And all of these will work to give the families some opportunities to where they might want to go. We understand we have the needs of the Marines, but where they might go, where their skills might take them, where they become part of the decision cycle. And I've not too many times that where I went, my wife I didn't talk about. So it's great to have the unit in there. And most important in terms of how we retain our folks, we got to use some inclusive habits. We got to be fair, because if you're not fair, it's game over. Okay, like Maslow's hierarchy, that's most important. Got to be open in dialogue, be cooperative, empowering, and supportive. And to our families, we got a lot of family support programs that are out there for you. We do. We have the installations that are there that you can tie in. The installation commander is like a mayor. He works with certainly with the Chamber of Commerce and all those others. If you're having problems with discrimination, other problems you're having, connect in. Stay connected in. You're never alone. Never alone. And I just want to give that message to our families that we're all together and we're one team.
Times two.
All right. Thank you all so much for coming, and I've really enjoyed this conversation today. You guys are so much fun to have on and talk. I would like to pass it back to Susan Hogan for our closing conversation.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Strong, and thank you to all of our panelists. We heard from such incredible speakers who shared their personal experiences and insights on the top issues facing military families of color. So as we wrap up, I want to ask First Sergeant C.T. Moss, Director of the Campaign for Inclusion at Blue Star Families, and General Gwen Bingham for their reactions on today's panel and the discussion and also the survey results. Let me start with you, C.T. Anything that stood out to you?
Just so much stood out to me. However, what was most is just how we're having this conversation and we're talking about it. I think there are genuine people who really want that all military families feel a sense of belonging in the community. And it's so important that we just work together to ensure everyone feels welcome. So yes.
Oh, good. How about you, General?
I thank you for the question, and I was just awestruck with such incredible leaders in each of their fields and not surprised at all. It just goes to show that when you and I spoke at the opening, we talked about how this journey began 3 years ago to where it has morphed and where we find ourselves now. So we are guided by the research and the data. Our intent is to assess that and then to act upon that. We would definitely be wrong not to take it from this point forward and act on what we've learned about.
And the one thing that I really am interested in is the importance of mentorship. And you had told me at the beginning when we met that the General is your mentor and continues to be your mentor. Tell me a little bit about that and the impact that she has had on your life.
Yes, Susan, I don't think that General Bingham knew that she was my mentor well before she realized that she was my mentor. I had the honor and privilege of working with her on her staff when I was just a young E5, a sergeant promotable, working for her command sergeant major. And just watching her every day is what was so inspirational. We hear that. You never know who's watching you. And I watched her closely. And over the years, she really instilled in me, that to have the confidence to be such a great leader. And I just remember conversations of her coming into the office and saying, you have talents, and then it was Sergeant Moss, you have talent, Sergeant Moss. And I'm thinking, well, General Bingham says I have talent. I must have, and just being it, and her reaching out and us being able to stay in contact over the years. And when it was time for me to retire, her asking what's next and how important that was. And ma'am, I don't want to put you on the spot telling the story, but just whenever I was trying to make a decision, I knew that I wanted to stay connected to the military community, being that I am a military mom, and I spent my entire adult life in the military. And so it was going to be so important for me to stay, and just her sitting down over a Zoom call because she's in Texas and I'm in Florida, and going line by line of my resume and the investment that she had in me is what really, truly, I could never repay her. I could never repay you, ma'am, but I promised that I would pay it forward to anyone else to really be able to spend that time. So I want to give back and pay that forward. So thank you, ma'am.
That is neat. Did you know you had such an impact on CT?
I know that she was a very, very talented member of the team, and I felt very blessed to have her on the team. And there's a saying that says, each one teach one. and to whom much is given, much is expected. And so for me, as I followed her career, just to know how talented she was and to retire at the rank of first sergeant just made me incredibly proud. And so when Kathy was looking for someone to fill this position over 3 years ago, she was the person who readily came to mind, and we struck gold when we got CT in this position. I'm just so grateful for her and the journey that we've made together.
Well, it's so lovely and it's impressive as the outsider looking into this. What should and what can you advise people who would like to do more with community service and getting involved with this, with Blue Star Families, whatever it may be? What is the secret to the success, and how do you get those people to come in and want to do this?
Yeah, I think it begins from a place of passion and caring. That's what Kathy brings to the table every single day, is that big heart of hers and that sense of caring, where it's easy to be a part of an organization like this one. I know CT has enjoyed it over the past 3 years. I certainly have enjoyed it. But using your passion and then putting your voice in action with that passion. And so we've heard so much today about the data. We've heard from other military leaders about some of the initiatives they're doing and some of the work and the responses that they are hearing. So now let's take it to the next step and see how we can all come together in partnership to work as a team.
And whenever I do stories, I always do interviews as well. I'm always saying, how did we get here, and where can we go from here? Mm-hmm. Where's that progress and the forward thinking? And it's great to have the discussions and have the survey, but what's next? What happens next? Where's the action?
Mm-hmm. This is something that Dr. Strong and I, in our team, we talk a lot about. And it's so important. Yes, we have the data. We're sharing it with everyone. But that what's next is that our call for action and it's solutions. Mm-hmm. We want to be able to bridge the gap within the community. I think that the community sometimes has a perception of what military families are like. Mm-hmm. And we truly want to feel connected in our community. We don't always have the pleasure and the leisure to choose where we live because we're serving. But despite that, we want to feel welcome in that sense of belonging. So moving forward, our campaign for conclusion, we will continue to take this show on the road. We will launch our campaign 3.0, that's really surrounded and rooted in community solutions. There is an intersectionality because it is a campaign for inclusion. There's an intersectionality with race and gender and sexuality, and just being able to just talk about all those elements and components to inclusion. And so I'm very excited about what the future believe and will lead to in our community solutions. And I'm excited to know that tomorrow we will sit down with community leaders, DOD senior leaders, and just talk in military service organizations as well as veteran service organizations. We want to get together and just have a huge brainstorming session where we can discuss what are those community solutions and then bring those back, out into the communities.
Right. How about for you, General?
Yeah, I really appreciate it, and it resonates with me in a former role as a garrison commander. What many people may not know is that the military, 70% of our military actually reside and live outside the gates, as I like to say. That's a staggering amount of numbers. So you have 30% of the military lives on base or on the installation. 70% live in the communities. And so we have such a positive opportunity to really see where we can come together with those community leaders to, as CT mentioned, find what the resolutions are to the problems that we have now analyzed and found out what they are. And so I'm excited about the work that will continue starting tomorrow going forward, being able to, my favorite word, team, together everyone achieves more, to be able to really come to workable solutions, and we'll get there.
What do you think is your biggest obstacle? Putting you on the spot, CT. What do you think?
To get people to be vulnerable to share their stories. Okay. Someone on the panel today mentioned, and I think it was Chief Master Sergeant, he mentioned about the first time that a problem is talked about shouldn't be when there's an incident. Yeah. And so just being able to have senior leaders to reach down within their organizations, within the ranks, and to talk about and to find out what's happening, what's going on with your family. Do you feel safe in the community? It starts there, having a conversation, but it doesn't end there. And then we put those into action through our support and resources and programs. And that really, truly is what Blue Star Families is about.
How about you? What do you think is an
Listening.
obstacle? Okay.
Listening and allowing people freely to speak, as CT said, what is at the core of whatever those challenges are. But we as leaders, we must listen to what those are, and then we've got to believe the research now. I mean, what makes Blue Star Family such a positive and powerful organization is that our information is rooted in data. And so to really see that data, to assess that data, believe it, and then come together to find those workable solutions. And so it's about changing some mindsets too, because time is changing. And we in the military, we are competing for talent just like corporations are competing for talent. We heard that some of the survey results were skeptical as to whether military members would stay in the military. You know, I so look at this as a readiness issue. And so that's why it's vitally important, whether or not you are in a corporation or you're in the military, as we are talking about today, we have a responsibility as leaders to hear the voice of the military and those family members so that they too can serve without a feeling of any kind of challenge or fear.
I did a story not too long ago about food insecurity, and we interviewed a military family, and they said the biggest obstacle for them is that they didn't feel confident and comfortable enough to go to the command because they were afraid of retaliation. Do you find that happening when you're talking about inclusion and equality and all of that? That some of these families are afraid to talk about it?
Yeah, and I think no doubt that's out there. And that's where, when you started talking about the mentorship, that's one of the benefits of having a mentor or mentors, or people who you trust and people who you can tell things to that you know will put it in the right chain of command or leadership channels to make sure that good resolutions come about of that. And so what we are working to do is change those kinds of mindset. Hey, trust us to take what you're telling us seriously, and we want to ensure that we share that same information from our data with those chain of command leaders.
What is next for the campaign for inclusion? As we kind of wrap this up, we only have about 2 minutes. I'll start with you. No pressure. You have 1 minute.
No, it's okay. You know, as I was mentioning earlier with our campaign for Inclusion 3.0 and how we will continue to, once we are able to work with individuals and other organizations within a community on solutions, is just being able to share that. We want to identify who in the community should we be talking to. Is it the school liaisons? We just want to be very closely connected, and so that is what's next for Campaign for Inclusion. We will continue this work and listening to our families.
You said it best, CT, and I'll end on her note of being able to share and then come together for workable solutions.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, that's what everyone wants, is to know that there is forward movement, right? And the one thing that we also want to make sure that we do want to remind you about this data deep dive at 3 p.m. So if you want more data, Blue Star Families has you covered. So you don't want to forget to join the Blue Star Families and the IVMF research teams. That's going to be at 3 o'clock Eastern Time. You can dive deep into the survey findings. They are ready to answer all of your questions as well. Ladies, this has been just such a wonderful event, such a wonderful time meeting you and to getting to know you both. Do you feel good about what went on today and the future?
Really do. I really do. And again, just from where we started 3 years ago to see where we've advanced to, it's incredible. And I'm just so grateful and give thanks to our fearless leader, Kathy Lofty-Kay, who started us on this great azimuth.
Well, that's great. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, and good luck. And I look forward to seeing what happens and what comes out of the survey and the challenges that you face. I hope that you can overcome them and make it all work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you. And I want to thank all of our speakers, of course, and our panelists for this time and for their expertise. It is clear that this campaign for inclusion is essential in supporting military families of color. and ensuring that they feel a sense of belonging. And thank you, Blue Star families, for inviting me to be a part of this important discussion. The work is just beginning, and we look forward to continuing this important conversation and seeing you at Blue Star Families' next event. Thank you so much.